Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 17th of June. Well, we saw quite the nice up move and everything was going fine. And then all of a sudden, Donald Trump mentioned that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons and that everyone should leave Tehran. That left everybody like, what's happening? And then he left the G7 to run back to national security briefing. Who knows what that means? And that's exactly what the market is saying. What does that mean? Is there going to be some kind of massive attack or something like that? We don't know. But clearly, we've seen a shift in where the administration is going, and the implications are interesting. When we look at our NASDAQ, that's still weak here. We started to move above the magenta back over the 33, which was strong, starting off softer in there, and you can see definite increase in short activity. We held on to uh, positive shakeout, but just barely, and that puts you right at a precipice. So um, things are still fine as far as where you're at relative to the 76%, but you can see the stall out that sort of developed from this, and you can see a shift now domestically too. You'll notice that we had talked about this some weeks ago, where it was becoming very clear the difference in inflation between blue states and red states, and where you were as far as policy. And it's interesting that you just had Trump announce that he's going to be doing more deportations in blue states, and you think, well, why help them out in any way, shape, or form? Because what it does have is, and this is something economists don't really want to talk about much, it will have a huge deflationary impact in those areas where you create deportations. Because number one, most of the money that a large portion of it is made and remitted to third-party countries, which is why Mexico is so upset about the idea of the increase in remittance taxes. So you're not able to get oil down. You're not able to do these things. Well, where else can you create a deflationary environment? Well, you have too much product because you've removed X number of individuals. You just ease off pressures, and then you have to start liquidating excess supply, and that is lower prices. So is that a cynical view? You can take it for what it is, but it's definitely something that's interesting, because you would think, well, why even bother doing that kind of thing? And it becomes real interesting when you look at the broader narrative, because the broader picture was, you could survive with it if you just made energy cheap. And that solves it. But that's not happening because of the delays of that. And I think they're starting to realize the numbers, that they're not going to get any resolution this year for any of those things that are important. So when we look at the Nasdaq, you can see it did a little bit better, but still, also, then it's in a danger zone, and you're not going to see that crossover here on the DOC of green over cyan unless things turn around. Now, it was a pretty strong up move. You would normally get it to 30%, 50% retrace in it. Um, but that geopolitical, broader scale situation is a problem. That there is zero assistance from the Fed in this case, and no matter how much jawboning he does about getting rid of Powell or not getting rid of Powell, but still being upset with Powell, it doesn't matter. The Fed's not going to be helping them in any way, shape, or form. And this lies into the secondary issue of the tariff situation and why you don't see inflation. And this was one of those things that just simple economists couldn't figure out. They think that just because you add a tariff, that automatically means that people are going to buy that product at a higher price. It was never the case. Most of those prices didn't get passed through. There were plenty of alternatives for people to pick other areas. Uh, so it really was a non-issue. And then you throw in reducing population within certain regions, and wow, you get a deflationary cycle built into that. And that's why you're seeing some of the lowest inflationary. But this is a nightmare, because this throws it all up in the air and turns it all upside down. Now, if you get a continued fallback from it and things are resolved, fine. But not with the direction things are headed. And you're talking about events that aren't always in control of the U.S. president in this particular case, though he's not helping in any way with the Israeli-Iran situation, because that's just prompting fear, and fear is always going to generate this kind of a spike in commodities because people don't know. It's like, is this the last oil I'm getting? Kind of thought process. Now it hasn't gotten into critical, but you can see how quickly it can get out of control, and that's why it's definitely concerning for a market when you hear someone say, "Oh, you evacuate the entire capital," and already you're seeing, Iranian refineries on fire and stuff, and you're just like, "Whoa." So things can spiral quickly, and we pay attention to these things. From a euro standpoint, yeah, they're floating high, even though they're the ones that suffer from increased oil price, and dramatically so, much more than the U.S. will, at least from an economic standpoint in the short term, because EU's got to import all of it. From a gold standpoint, that should be beneficial to gold in the broader sense. The daily fluctuations, that's a paper market situation, but overall, gold is still being the hot commodity and drawn, and even crypto as the parking place. But again, reflective of Nasdaq, and you can see this. I mean, the exact same move relative to the Nasdaq. So you get that. Symbiotic trade going on in there. It's just proportionally higher beta than the overall Nasdaq, but that's exactly how it's been trading. And you can ignore that, and we'll look for a decoupling, but it hasn't taken place at this particular stage, and it becomes the idea that they're still pushing for conversion to more crypto use. It just hasn't become mainstream, and they still haven't figured that part of it out. So we ended up with that short cover rally with the magenta over white, and when you ride that high, it's always really a nice move. And you haven't seen the flip over until we ended up breaking down below the 33 with magenta under yellow, and then once below the 25, you knew that things were not looking good. The fortunate thing was no MBI white spike, but once it started to make a little bit of a move, that was all it took. And shakeout's been pretty negative here since the initial breakdown from the beginning, and it hasn't recovered from that yet. And that's the thing, when you see that spike running towards zero and you don't get there, you get your first tick down. You know that it's just a matter of waiting it out. They can have a few moves in between, but more often than not, that one just cascades lower. So you had the early buys, again, options plays. So you had everyone who was negative from before, then got flipped around, and then they sold into all that new call buying with additional puts, and they're having their go at it this particular point. And of course, that imbalance will force call buyers to come back in at a certain point, barring any international situation, and that's obviously what we look at. So that's the focus now. Everything is pretty much open to everyone now because international affairs, you can't hide them. So everyone's going to know what's happening. The only thing you won't know is if bombing was planned, that we could see a dramatic drop where there's no news, and that would give you your clue. And we'll see that on our readings, most likely even before, because the selling will start quietly, and then that rumor starts spreading fast. So that's another story for another time. We'll see if it takes place, though. As always, though, trade well. Anything relevant, I'll put it on our team chat. Have a good one.